Thank you, Virginia. Let's go straight back to our top story now, and the government's attempts to win Senate backing for its education funding package. As we've been reporting this morning, the numbers are very tight. They could be even tighter given the potential behaviour of one West Australian Liberal Senator, Chris Back, and that senator joins me now from Canberra. Senator, good morning to you.
Michael, good morning. And before we get on to the topic, don't forget that the American boat is dominated by an Aussie crew in the America's Cup defence. So
yes,
we
know
forget
that.
the influence of the Aussies.
Yeah,
Michael,
they need our help to win. So let's hope the Aussies can do very well.
Absolutely.
Let's come back to the funding package. Will you vote against the current Gonski legislation as it stands? Vote against that legislation?
Well, Michael, I'm very hopeful that by the time it comes before the Senate, we will have been able to arrive at a situation in which I can support it. Just at the moment, I'm not satisfied that the arrangement for the funding for Catholic schools around Australia is as it should be. Obviously, I'm having discussions with the Minister. They are proving very productive, and I hope that we will arrive at a landing.
OK, now the government has promised $3.4 billion extra for Catholic schools over the decade. That's not enough in your view?
Well, it's not a question of being not enough, Michael. It's a question of the distribution and how you calculate the figures. And basically at the moment there is what's called a system-weighted average. And indeed what the Minister's proposing is to move towards an individual student weighting. And I believe that does not actually meet the requirement of assessing the capacity of parents to pay. The question can be answered, and neither incidentally did Gonski originally, and I believe Professor Farish, who is the architect of the SES system, I don't think he believes it's working. So my plea to the Minister, and we're having discussions, is to allow Professor Farish and other competent people to have a look at that system for 12 months, to come back to government and indeed to either confirm their suspicion that it isn't working or indeed to be able to prove that it is.
Okay,
that's where my sticking block is.
Okay, you want to delay the legislation, therefore?
No, not the whole legislation, no. Aspects of it, particularly the funding for government schools and others, I think is excellent. But we at the moment are proposing, or the Minister's proposing, a move from one system of weighting to another. The Catholic system and I are very, very concerned the impact that's going to have on Catholic schools around Australia, Michael. Low socioeconomic schools, rural areas, regional, but indeed suburbs in the cities. So until that can be resolved, and I'm confident that it can be, until that can be resolved, I will not be in a position to proceed.
OK, now you spent about a decade at the Catholic Education Commission, so you know of which you speak in terms of the potential impact on schools. We have some people in the Catholic sector saying schools could even close, be forced to close under the current funding model. Do those arguments hold weight?
Yes, they do. I've identified a number of schools in Western Australia. I've had those discussions with the South Australians and they have similar concerns. You see, Michael, there are schools around Queensland and Western Australia where the only education offering in small remote towns is by the Catholic system. We can't have them closing. We can't have a circumstance in which parents simply cannot afford to pay the fees, even in the suburbs and the cities. What's the point of one Catholic school closing when parents can't afford the fees? They won't be able to afford the fees to go to another school either. And Michael, the point needs to be made strongly that up to a third of children in Catholic schools in Australia are not Catholic. But of course, choice is something that's critically important. You would have the critics say, well, let the Catholics make their own mind up. Well, as a taxpayer, Michael, I've been supporting funding in government schools all of my tax-paying life, and I'm happy to do that. But parents also have the right of choice. Having paid their contribution to the running of government schools, they then make the choice to send their children to Catholic schools. And that is something that is absolutely critical. And Michael, the other point to be borne in mind is that the running of a government school is totally paid for by governments, be they state or federal. When it comes to the Catholic system, it is pretty well the fees or the salaries of teachers and support people that are paid for by the governments. But the actual running of the schools, Michael, the building, the capital cost of building the schools in the first place, water, power, other services, all of those ongoings, they are met largely by parents' contributions through fees. So let us not think for a minute that it's 100% towards both systems. And of course, as one who is leaving the Parliament this week, I want to make sure that I don't have to leave in a circumstance in which I'm dissatisfied with the financial support to Catholic and independent schools into the future.
If you cross the floor and vote against the legislation, if it doesn't change, it'll be something of a parting gift, won't it, for the government?
Well, I certainly hope that wouldn't be the case. I have crossed the floor, of course, before. That's the beauty of our political party, Michael. We can cross the floor and remain within the ranks. Our opponents can't. But I remain optimistic. The minister is a very, very good minister. He's across the issues and I'm confident we'll be able to resolve them.
OK, so he's given you signals he might be able to take some of your concerns on board.
Robust discussions, Michael, robust
There have been a lot of those within Liberal ranks at the moment, haven't there, Senator?
Well, that's good, isn't it? You know, we've obviously been dealing with Finkel and I've long been in the energy area as well, Michael. I came out of the oil and gas sector prior to coming into Parliament. And again, it's tremendous to see the robustness of the discussions. Josh Frydenberg doing a fantastic job. It's well known I have absolutely no time for wind power. And when I hear even highly respected colleagues, Alan Kohler, talking about wind being a zero cost when each turbine is subsidised to the tune of $800,000 a year by the consumer, it's a little bit rich for me. But again, I remain optimistic. I think there is a solution which will contain energy costs to consumers. I was the person last June, who predicted that there would be mass blackout of power in South Australia. Regrettably, I was right. So therefore, I think these matters need to be the subject of good, robust discussion, so long as there's respect for the views of the other person.
OK,
Michael.
Because you're about to leave, Senator, you might be liberated to speak more openly, particularly on these opinion polls. The latest news poll, very bad news for the government, 53 to 47 to Labor. Can the government pull itself out of its spiral, in your view?
Michael, I also come out of the horse racing industry. You know where the important thing is in the Melbourne Cup? The horse's nose on the line. Doesn't matter where it is at Chiquita Lodge on the other side of the track. It doesn't matter where it is at the top of the straight. When people start really thinking seriously about who would be the opponent government or the alternative government of this country, heaven forbid that we would have a Shorten-led Labor government, Michael. There are black clouds over the world economy. There are black clouds, not just affecting Europe and the United States and Asia, but also Australia. And people will need to think very carefully as to who the more economic responsible managers are to take this country further into the future. We've got an absolutely bright future. Asia is beckoning us. We're already doing very, very well, Michael, but heaven forbid that we would return to the socialism that Bill Shorten is predicting and projecting. OK,
we'll see how the Gonski debate turns out this week. Senator Chris Back, thank you very much for joining us on News
My
Breakfast.
pleasure, Michael. Good to speak to you.
You too.